The city of Chicago was wrapped in a pale orange haze as the sun dipped behind the skyline. From the far side of the river, the glitter of high-rise towers reflected on the muddy water, a mirror of two worlds that could never truly meet. Aisha Miller, a 17-year-old girl from the South Side, walked home after another long day. Her sneakers were torn, her backpack half-zipped, and her mind still echoing with the teacher's words. "You're the brightest student in the entire district." She smiled, but the smile faded before it reached her eyes. At home, her mother stood by the kitchen counter, counting coins to see if they could afford dinner. Her father, once a factory worker, had lost his job months ago when the plant shut down. "Mom, I got first place again," Aisha said softly. Her mother smiled faintly. "That's good, sweetheart." But her tone carried exhaustion instead of pride. Through the cracked window, Aisha could see the skyline, glass towers glowing like distant stars. She whispered to herself, "One day, I'll be there," not looking up at the lights, but standing among them. And that whisper, quiet and fragile, was the beginning of a storm that would change everything. Days turned into weeks, and life for Aisha was a slow rhythm of school, work, and survival. Every evening, she helped her mother at a small diner, wiping tables while the city's wealthy passed by outside in their expensive coats and polished smiles. One night, as she scrubbed a counter, her classmate Olivia Parker walked in with her friends. They were loud, laughing, their perfume filling the room like a reminder of a life Aisha could never afford. "Aisha? You work here?" Olivia asked, half surprised, half amused. Aisha nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, part-time." Olivia's friends exchanged glances. One of them whispered, "She's the scholarship girl, right?" They laughed softly, not cruelly, but with that careless tone only privilege can carry. The next morning, Olivia approached Aisha in school. "Hey, my parents are throwing a small party this weekend. You should come. Everyone will be there." Aisha hesitated. She knew she didn't belong in their world, but something inside her, pride maybe, made her say yes. That Saturday, she stood before a giant house in Lincoln Park, the kind of mansion she had only seen in magazines. The air smelled of wealth, fresh flowers, fine wine, and the absence of worry. When Aisha stepped inside, every eye turned toward her. Her simple dress, her worn shoes, they didn't fit. Conversations paused. Someone whispered, "Who invited her?" For a moment, Aisha wanted to disappear. But then she lifted her head, squared her shoulders, and smiled. She didn't come to blend in, she came to belong. The laughter at the party was soft and sharp, like the clinking of glass that followed every cruel word disguised as a joke. Aisha stood near the corner, clutching a glass of juice she didn't even sip. The chandelier above sparkled, scattering diamonds of light across polished marble, but none of it could hide how out of place she felt. Olivia walked over, trying to ease the tension. "You look nice," she said, though her tone trembled with pity more than warmth. Aisha smiled faintly, "Thanks." Moments later, a boy named Ryan Cooper, Olivia's cousin, smirked as he looked her up and down. "So you're the one from Southside, huh? The genius girl? Must feel strange to be this far north." The group chuckled. Aisha's fingers tightened around the glass. She wanted to speak, to say something that would silence them, but words caught in her throat. Instead, she turned and walked toward the balcony, the night air cold against her skin. Outside, Chicago's skyline glittered in the distance. It looked close enough to touch, yet felt like another universe. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She had promised herself never to cry in front of people who thought she was less. Then, from behind her, a soft voice said, "Don't let them get to you." It was Liam, one of the quieter boys in class. He wasn't dressed like the others, no arrogance in his stance, just kindness in his eyes. Aisha managed a small smile. He added, "They laugh because they're scared, scared that someone without money might outshine them." For the first time that night, she felt seen, not as a charity case, not as an outsider, but as herself. The next morning, Aisha sat by the small window of her room, the faint Chicago sunlight falling on her open notebook. The words from last night still echoed in her head. The laughter, the glances, the feeling of not belonging. Her mother knocked gently. "You didn't sleep?" Aisha shook her head. "It's fine, Mom. Just thinking." Her mother sat beside her, running a hand through her daughter's hair. People will always talk. But you were born to rise, not to listen. Those words settled deep in Aisha's heart. She didn't respond, but she closed her notebook and opened a new one, the first page blank, waiting for a new version of her life to begin. At school, whispers still followed her down the hallway, but she ignored them. She studied harder, stayed after class, and even started tutoring other students. Slowly, teachers noticed. One afternoon, her principal called her in. "Aisha," he said, "there's an essay competition, national level. The winner gets a scholarship to the University of Chicago. I think you should apply." Her heart skipped a beat. This was it, a door to the world she'd dreamed of, the bridge she'd once whispered about crossing. At home that night, she told her father about it. He listened quietly, eyes heavy with fatigue but shining with pride. "You've always been my hope," he said softly. "Do it. Show them who you are." As she looked at him, Aisha realized this wasn't just her dream anymore. It was theirs. And this time, she wasn't just chasing light. She was becoming it. The essay competition became Aisha's world. Every night, she sat by the window with her pen and notebook, her lamp the only star glowing in their small apartment. Her words flowed like confessions, stories of struggle, pride, and the invisible walls that divided her city. Her father would quietly bring her tea, his hands rough, his eyes filled with silent faith. Sometimes he'd say, "You write like you're speaking to God." And maybe she was. Weeks passed and submission day arrived. Aisha printed her essay at the local library, The Bridge Between Worlds. As she handed it over to the coordinator, her fingers trembled. It wasn't just paper. It was every sleepless night, every insult she'd swallowed, every dream she refused to bury. Days turned into restless waiting. At school, her classmates talked about parties and college trips, while Aisha tried to silence the doubt whispering in her head. Then one afternoon she got the email. Subject: National Essay Competition Results. She clicked, her breath frozen. "Congratulations, Aisha Miller, first place winner." Her mother screamed with joy. Her father lifted her in his arms, laughter echoing through their tiny apartment. For a brief, golden moment, they forgot the rent, the bills, the hunger. They only remembered pride. But not everyone celebrated. At school, Olivia's smile was tight, her words sweet but hollow. "Wow, you actually won. Guess talent really can come from anywhere." Aisha just smiled. She didn't need validation anymore. She had proof. Winning the competition changed everything, almost. Aisha's name was printed in local newspapers. Her photo appeared on the school board, her essay shared across online platforms. Teachers praised her, students whispered her name, and for a while, it felt like she'd finally stepped into the light. But light has a way of casting deeper shadows. The more recognition she got, the colder some faces became. Olivia stopped talking to her completely, and Ryan's taunts grew sharper, now hidden behind sarcasm and fake smiles. One afternoon, Aisha overheard them in the hallway. "She's just a charity case. The judges probably pitted her story," Ryan said. Olivia added softly, "Yes, some people just get lucky." The word stung, but Aisha didn't stop walking. That night, as she lay awake, she wondered if success was supposed to feel this lonely. Her father noticed her silence at dinner. "Something wrong?" he asked. Aisha shook her head. "No, Dad. Just tired." But deep down, she wasn't tired, she was burning. The world didn't scare her anymore. It challenged her. Every insult, every sneer became fuel. She opened her laptop and began writing again. Not for a contest, not for a prize, but for herself. Words poured out, fierce and unfiltered. She wrote about power, class, kindness, and cruelty. About people who build walls instead of bridges. And somewhere in the middle of those words, she found peace. Winter came early that year. Chicago's streets were covered in frost, the kind that crept up windows and settled into bones. Aisha walked home through the cold, her breath a pale mist in the dim streetlight. Her father hadn't come home yet, and her mother's voice carried a tremor of worry. He said the factory manager called him in. Her mother whispered, "Maybe they found him more work." But hours passed. Midnight came. The front door never opened. By morning, The police arrived. An accident. A delivery truck. A hit and run. The world fell silent. Aisha didn't cry, not at first. She just stood there, frozen, watching the words fall from the officer's mouth like broken glass. Her mother collapsed to the floor. Neighbors gathered, murmuring prayers and condolences, but Aisha heard nothing. That night, the house was full of people, yet felt emptier than ever. She sat beside her father's sewing machine, tracing her fingers over the old thread and needles. On the table lay his last unfinished shirt, a customer's name pinned to it. Her tears finally came, slow at first, then endless. She whispered, "You told me to rise, but how do I rise without you?" Outside, the city lights blurred through the window, shimmering like ghosts of everything she'd lost. And in that grief, something inside her cracked open, not weakness but an awakening. The world had taken too much from her already. She swore it wouldn't take her purpose too. The days after her father's death blurred together. Long hours of condolences, empty words, and the constant sound of silence. Chicago felt colder, harsher. The world kept moving while Aisha stood still, caught between heartbreak and survival. Bills began piling up. Her mother took extra shifts at the diner, her hands trembling as she worked. Aisha wanted to help, but every time she passed her father's empty chair, her chest tightened. One night, she found his old toolbox, the one he used to carry to the factory. Inside was a folded note, written in his uneven handwriting. "If you're reading this, I couldn't give you the world. But I know you'll build your own. Never stop, Aisha. Never let them break you." Tears blurred her vision. She pressed the note to her heart, whispering, "I won't, Dad. I promise." The next morning, she returned to school, tired, pale, but determined. Some classmates offered kind words. Others avoided her completely. Olivia looked uncomfortable, muttering a quiet, "Sorry for your loss," before walking away. But Aisha didn't need their pity. She needed purpose. She met Liam near the lockers. "You came back," he said softly. "I had to," she replied. "If I stop now, everything he believed in dies with him." From that day on, Aisha buried herself in her work. Extra classes, volunteering, and writing articles for the school paper about inequality and dreams. Her voice grew stronger, her words sharper. Pain had become her teacher, and grief, her fire. Spring thawed Chicago's frozen streets, but inside Aisha the winter still lingered. She spent her evenings at the public library, typing articles on an old computer, stories about families like hers, workers like her father, and children who dreamed beyond their circumstances. Her writing began to spread online. Teachers shared her work. A small local newspaper reached out for permission to publish one of her essays. The title read, "Dreams Don't Belong to the Rich Alone." The article went viral across the city. Suddenly, her inbox flooded with messages, students, mothers, factory workers, all thanking her for saying what they had always felt but never dared to speak. Even Olivia saw it. She didn't say anything in person, but her social media post read, "Sometimes the people we underestimate are the ones who remind us who we are." At school, things changed. The same students who once mocked her now asked for her advice, her help with projects, her thoughts on college essays. But Aisha didn't let the attention cloud her. One afternoon, her teacher approached her with an invitation. "The University of Chicago wants you to speak at their youth conference," she said. "They've read your essays. They want to hear you in person." Aisha froze. Her dream, that glowing skyline she once watched from across the river, was finally calling her name. That night, she stood by her window again, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "This time, Dad," she whispered, "I'll cross the bridge for real." The auditorium was grand. Golden chandeliers, polished wood floors, and rows of faces that once would have terrified Aisha. Now, as she stood backstage at the University of Chicago Youth Conference, she felt something else, calm. Liam found her there, holding the speech in her trembling hands. "You ready?" he asked. She smiled. "I've been ready my whole life." When her name was called, the applause was polite at first, the kind given to a stranger. But as she stepped onto the stage, something in her presence silenced the room. She began softly, her voice trembling but sincere. "My father used to say that dreams aren't meant to be locked behind glass towers. They belong to anyone brave enough to chase them. She spoke about poverty, loss, and the invisible lines that divide people. She told them about the bridge between South Side and downtown, not of concrete but of courage. The audience leaned in, spellbound. Every sentence carried truth, every pause carried pain. By the time she finished, the hall was silent, the kind of silence that follows something real. Then applause erupted, thunderous, endless. Some stood, some cried. Olivia, sitting in the front row, wiped a tear. Even Ryan looked away, ashamed. Aisha stepped off the stage and looked up at the glowing lights. For years, she had dreamed of standing among them. And now she was the brightest one. But deep inside she whispered, "This isn't my peak. This is my beginning." After the speech, the world moved fast. News outlets, interviews, and invitations flooded in. But Aisha didn't feel famous. She felt seen. A week later, she returned home. The same small apartment that once echoed with silence and fear. But now, every corner felt alive. Her father sat by the window, a soft smile playing on his lips. "I watched you on TV," he said. "You spoke like your mother used to, with fire." Tears blurred her eyes as she knelt beside him. "She would have been proud," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "She is proud. Because you turned pain into power." That night, the neighborhood gathered outside. Lights, music, and laughter filled the street. Kids ran around wearing paper crowns, pretending to be Aisha. Old Mrs. Harris from next door handed her a small box. Inside was a silver pendant, engraved with the words, "Rise, no matter who tries to bury you." Liam showed up later, holding 2 cups of coffee. "So," he said with a grin, "Miss World Changer, what's next?" Aisha looked at the skyline, the same one that once felt unreachable. "Next," she said softly, "I'm going to build something that no one can tear down, a school for dreamers." He smiled. "Then I'm in." They stood together under the flickering streetlight, the city humming around them, alive, awake, and full of promise. Aisha had started as a girl the world tried to humiliate, but she ended as the woman who made the world listen. 10 years later, the once forgotten corner of South Side had transformed. Where broken buildings once stood, now rose a vibrant brick and glass academy, the Horizon Institute, a school founded by Aisha Malik. Children from every background laughed and studied there, painting murals on the walls, learning to speak without fear. And right at the entrance stood a bronze statue, a little girl holding a paper bridge, beneath it, engraved, "Dreams belong to everyone." Aisha, now a writer and educator, stood watching as a group of students ran past. One girl stopped and asked, "Miss Malik, is it true you used to live here?" Aisha smiled. "Yes, I did. And if I hadn't, I wouldn't have become who I am." Later that day, she visited her father's grave. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, just like it used to. She placed fresh lilies on the stone and whispered, "I crossed the bridge, Dad. And I built another one for everyone else." The wind carried her words through the trees, as if answering back. Walking away, she paused at the top of the hill, the same spot where she once watched the world and wondered if she'd ever belong. Now she did more than belong, she led. And as the sun dipped behind the skyscrapers, her shadow stretched across the city, a reminder that even from the smallest corners, light can rise high enough to touch the sky.